Cutter's Degrassi Unpopular Opinions. Hey there, hello there. It's Jeff Cutter Darling welcoming you to another Degrassi Unpopular Opinion. And since I've put up 51 of them already, I might as well give you a bit of a recap. The playlist will be down in the list below. So basically, the video description of this one I will put up and say, if you want to look at the playlist and all that. So, I've gone through a lot of them. My first one was the prologue, which basically was about the fact that the students should be blamed about Rick's bullying because, for what happened to Rick, the students did bring them themselves. Yes, they were all mad about how Rick abused Terry and all that. That was warranted. However, the problem is that they should have been blamed for the fact that they just didn't let it go. Rick had outscored everyone, and basically they couldn't let it go. Although in the end it was actually justified in a sense. But, yeah. I also talked about Paige and Mr. O, why that was a terrible relationship. Despite the fact that, Paige was having her problems in season 4. I talk about how Emma actually wanted to be with Sean in the wake of the Rick Murray situation because, Sean saved her life and basically she thought no other guy would have done that for her. I talk about how Emma was warranted in her hate in season 6. But she may have gotten angry at Manny and all that, but, Manny didn't give her the time of day to talk about her problems and all that. And I feel that Manny, by shunning Emma basically lashed out. I talk about how the bus crash in Next Class, seasons 2 and 3. Did they really need a bus crash for a storyline? Did they really need one? I talk about Spitter being the best redemption arc in Degrassi ever because of what he did in season 4 to do with Jimmy. And basically he wanted to get on the road of redemption. I talk about Emma's friendship with Manny and why Emma's friendship with Manny was actually good and all that, and how Emma was not crazy for, being the worst friend to Manny, and how Emma wanted to be a good friend to Manny, but it's perceived wrong. Talk about Maya and Miles in season 14. Was Maya attracted to Miles in season 14 for love or just for concern because she was afraid that Miles was going to be just like Cam? I talk about Emma seemingly protecting Peter in season 6 and why I don't think that was a good idea and all that. Why it seemed that Emma was protecting him more than Sean. I don't get it. I also talk about why Rick was never stopped, despite 4 chances to get him. And of course, I talk about Rick's clothing options and all that. I also talked about Raj's gripe on Emma. Did Raj have a gripe with Emma? Mostly because in Mercy Street, she didn't want Rick at the school, and basically he tells her there's not many stupid causes and all that. Like, did he have reason to get angry? I talk about how Ashley's downfall possibly was Paige's fault because season 2 she was trying to redeem herself, but basically Paige had told everyone to stay away from her, especially Terry. I talk about who was more at fault, Cam or Simpson, with the fact of the suicide in season 12. Like Cam, should have been more focal, and Simpson should have been more practical. I talk about the OGs and how they were slighted in Next Gen and all that, although some of it was on purpose and all that. I also talked about the Eagles in the aftermath. Did Jay or Raj have the biggest eagle after the shooting? I talk about how Craig was more of a dick than we all think he was. I talk about Liberty's pregnancy and all that, about that storyline. Alex's role in the Rick Murray story I talked about. Basically how, Alex had the right idea because, her mom had to do with explosive ex-boyfriends and all that. And basically Alex was just picturing every guy that did her mom wrong in the guise of Rick. I talk about Zombie Emma, and maybe the writers may have been forced to change her character because of early internet fan things. I talked about Emma and Manny season 5. Why I think Emma was terrible as a friend in season 5 and basically may have played Manny for chumps. Hatzalakos and Peter, why, Peter seemed to get away with more stuff than he should have. I talked about Toby and Liberty, that relationship, and how a lot of people say that, it was kind of a stupid relationship and all that, and that Toby should never have confessed to Liberty that JT wanted Liberty and all that. I talk about the season 4 deleted scenes, basically keep iterating that they should have been shown because they would have changed some perspectives. I talk about Snake's anger in season 10 after being played for a chump at Vegas night. Basically, was Snake overreacting, or was it justified what he did with the uniforms and all that? Punishment issues. I basically talk about how some people get punished for small things and not punished for big things. I talk about if Mia had lack of sympathy in season 6 after Jakey died. I talk about Sick and Maya, why those two were always involved with each other, and basically jealousy on both sides of the coin. College storyline issues, basically saying why the college storylines were terrible. The best characters in the LGBTQ2 category, basically like trying to represent a Degrassi character with each letter in the justification. Emma and Sean, Endgame, why they should have been Endgame. I also talk about Tristan and Marco looking for love and basically, being puppy dog love and basically can't do anything about it. I ranked the Hollingsworths based on their likability. I also did one on the Breakfast Club saying that, did they really need the Breakfast Club thing? But maybe they did. I talked about Darcy in season 7, about her problems with being raped and basically trying to hide it. Was Liberty over or underrated as a character? I also talked about Spinner. He should have kept his mouth shut. We're talking to Jimmy about the prank and all that, and that of course led to Jay trying to help Spinner out by blaming Jimmy for everything. Spike's downfall. I basically say why Spike fell as a character. The school board in season 4, basically, did they have an alternative method to why Raj only got reassigned and all that? Maybe they were scared that, Raj, if they fired him, Raj would have put a lawsuit on them. I also talk about Anya's timidness, why Anya seemed to be like following in everyone's shadow. Vince in season 13, why he was back, even though that he got in trouble with the Drew and Bianca thing. I put up a big video about Rick. Should we be sympathetic towards Rick? And I say we would, but he was the one who decided to go after people with a gun. Hatzelako's role, I talk about Hatzelako's role in the show, I guess. Zoe's role in Degrassi Nudes, I talk about that being an opinion, basically why Zoe did what she did. Emma's eating disorder continually. I talk about Shane in season 3 because Shane basically was there for one episode, and we finally got to know about Emma's dad and Emma meeting her dad, why that was just a one-off. Lesbians in the Degrassi universe, how they were portrayed and all that. Jimmy not suing Jay and Spinner in season 4. Basically, we could have sued. Toby's downfall, like why Toby fell as a character. Rick's dad was he a reason for Rick's temper, and I basically tell him why it's Paige's fault in a sense. Spinner. So that's basically getting down to the nitty gritty. I'm just trying to make sure that I cover my bases and don't do an easier one. Don't do the same thing twice. So in one of them, I mentioned about Vince and season 12. Season 13 part, why he somehow got out, even though that he did his criminal activities. Similar, and part of that is that when Vince is with having to do with Drew and Bianca and what they did to his gang and all that. So this is basically the unpopular opinion. All that is that I really thought that Bianca was basically playing Drew like a fiddle and taking advantage of Drew's naivety. So basically, Drew in season 11, no, sorry, was it 11 or 12 when this happened? I think it was season 12 when it happened. Part of me forgets these things. But in hindsight, it's like, why was Drew with Bianca and all that? Bianca was a troublemaker and all that, and Drew basically was falling in love with her and basically didn't care what people thought of him. I think that was season 11. So basically what ends up happening is that Drew and Bianca get together, but then all of a sudden, you know, when they go out, they meet somebody of Vince's gang by the name of Anson. Anson basically wants to rape Bianca, and Bianca basically says no and all that. Drew decides to fight for Bianca's honor and basically makes Anson pay. Or, sorry, thanks. Anson then gets the best of Drew, and it's like, well, that's that. And then Bianca, behind Anson, comes up with a rock and smashes it on his head, killing him and all that. They both run away from the scene, knowing that they have to get out of there and all that. And then all of a sudden, we see somebody look at something that's that was on the ground. It was Bianca's bracelet. Basically, he clutches on Bianca's bracelet, and we're thinking, well, I guess something's wrong, or maybe it was a police officer. So anyway, the whole situation with Anson is just strange as it sounds. So basically, Drew thinks that Bianca is really going to get in trouble. And with Bianca's past and how the police don't seem to take her seriously, he realizes that if Bianca gets in trouble with the law, then basically the cops are going to basically throw the book at Bianca. So Drew decides, despite all that, and despite being told that he can get out of trouble with Vince and his gang by basically being a lackey, Drew decides to hand over the gun that they said to protect himself and basically take the fall for Bianca. Although Bianca was the one at fault with the rock in her killing Anson, but that was only in self-defense because Anson wanted to rape her and wanted to kill Drew. Basically, Drew decides to take the fall for Bianca, knowing that Bianca deserves it and all that. So basically, yeah, all these things. And the worst part about it is that Vince basically comes back in Bianca's life and basically tells Bianca that you'll be my bitch. Sorry for the strong language, but that's how he says it. If you become my bitch, then basically Drew and the rest of your friends will survive and all that. So basically he puts Bianca to work and all that in exchange for the fact that he will not harm Drew and all that. Drew gets some community service and all that shit, but basically Drew decides that he needs to talk to Vince and end this thing once and for all. Unfortunately, Bianca says that Vince says it's not over till it's over, and basically Vince decides to shoot Drew, saying that basically I'm in charge here, you don't tell me what to do. So basically he goes to the prom looking for Drew's head. He shoots twice, but he strikes Adam and then misses with the second shot and then runs away from the scene. Adam is shot, they call 911, he's in the hospital. Bianca picks up the gun and is ready to go after Vince, basically saying, I have to end this. So basically, it could be taken both ways that maybe she kills herself, but no. She goes after Vince, but Drew convinces Bianca that this is not right and that basically you're going to harm yourself more than ever. So basically, Bianca doesn't do that. And of course, Drew's mom basically says that Bianca is the biggest piece of crap around and all that. This was in the protecting Drew phase. And Drew realized that Adam getting shot was his fault. And he basically says that, I take full responsibility for everything. I should not have gotten involved. And Bianca will need a good lawyer and all that. And Mrs. Torres agrees and basically helps Bianca throughout her problems. So Bianca basically gets community service and all that. Vince is put in jail and all that. And we were like, yes, great. And Bianca starts a redemption arc that actually works out in everyone's favor, that she's starting to be likable and all that. She does have a few hiccups, but Bianca's fine. And Drew, I guess because he feels like Bianca's the right girl, decides to marry Bianca. Of course, that doesn't go through in the end because I keep thinking that his mom was okay with the marriage and basically that Drew was upset and said that, if she's okay with it, I'm not okay with it. So they decided to go to Las Vegas to elope. But that doesn't happen. That was when Katie loses her college fund by gambling and almost sleeps with Zuckerberg. It's true. It's actually true. So basically, yeah. So Bianca decides to go to college and basically finds out that she's matured and doesn't need Drew. And basically leaves Drew high and tight. And basically Drew tries to get back in the dating scene by going with Claire and by going with Zoe. But obviously he fails. And he doesn't have a steady girlfriend at the end of everything. So basically, he's good and all that. To me, originally, I'm thinking that Bianca basically was playing Drew like a fiddle. I feel like Drew basically was under Bianca's spell. And Bianca used him to get what she wanted. Maybe Bianca was, helping Vince basically get Drew to the curb and all that. But no, in the end, it actually ended up being that Drew ended up being the good guy and all that. Bianca didn't use Drew. Basically, that Vince used Bianca to get at Drew and all that. I feel bad for Drew in a sense because, he seemed to be a good guy. And, he just probably felt terrible that he was played for a chump or something like that. And wishes that he had never been with Bianca. So basically, he decides to just move on, I guess. Drew left school and all that. He had his PTSD. I think it was because of Vince putting the gun to his brother and all that his PTSD grew. He wanted to be an ultimate fighter. I think he wanted to fight just to protect himself. And then he dropped out of school, and then he came back to school, became valedictorian for some reason. Well, sorry, he wasn't valedictorian. He was student council president. And he got lucky and all that. Of course, Drew's ending happened in season 14 in the episode two-parter finally, when he basically makes a proposal to Becky but gets shunned at. And Pill decides to not allow Drew at the prom, on the prom boat. Of course, the boat is mishandled, and Drew is told by his mom to save the prom by throwing it somewhere. I thought it was at the school, but it was at the dot. They went to the school to get the decorations and all that. But they threw it at the dot, and Pill is not too happy because she knows that Drew is the only one with the passcodes. And basically tells Drew that if anybody helped you out, finger them out, and we'll do something about it. Drew decides to take the fall for everything. He's not allowed to graduate. Well, he will graduate, but he's not allowed to be on the stage. And Pill basically makes it known that she has to make sure that she sets an example out of Drew for the new people. So basically, what I think is that basically, and I think I might make this another unpopular opinion later on, is about Pill and her rules and all that. I should do that as a CDUO / hot take. So basically, Drew is sitting with his mom and all that, but his mom isn't upset that he's not on stage and all that. However, the graduating class do with their caps saying "We love Drew" and all that. And basically, Pill decides to let Drew cross the stage because the school shows solidarity. So Drew graduates on a high note, and the series was supposed to graduate on a high note. But unfortunately, they decided to go with next class, and things took a weird turn. So for me, I feel like Bianca was playing Drew like a fiddle. That's not the case. Growing into watching the episodes and all that, I figured that Bianca was just a tragic case, and Drew just basically wanted protection and all that. And maybe with Bianca out of the way, he felt unprotected. So anyway, thanks for watching. Have yourself a good day.